Okay, let's do this thing. Actually, you know what? I want a coffee. Okay, now we're talking. So Anderson is sleeping right next to me and will probably join us shortly, but let's just get right into it because I fear this will be a million hours long. The first thing I want to say is if you are pregnant or, are going to have another baby and you want a positive hospital birth experience, then this is 1000% the video for you. I could cry tears of joy over the amazing experience I had with my second birth. So let's discuss. I feel like social media now is trying to paint this picture that the only way to have a really positive, peaceful birth is to have it at home, which, mind you, if you want to do that, that's great. I support you. I know you can have a peaceful, beautiful birth at home, but you can have that in a hospital as well. Because if you're like me, I am going to be more at peace and more comfortable in a hospital setting. So I feel there's a couple of backstory details I need to give. So I have lupus and I had cholestasis, which with my first daughter. So those two things had my OB wanting me to be induced around 38 weeks. So at the end, I was monitored every week with ultrasounds and NSTs. And unfortunately, with this pregnancy, I started getting itchy again right at 37 weeks, which is a symptom of cholestasis. The blood work for that takes about a week to come back anyway. So my doctor was like, you know what? Let's just take him out. You're 37 weeks. Come back tomorrow. A conversation that I have, had with many people, if you know me one-on-one, and with all of the nurses that I was seeing every single week, and with my OB, was that I was absolutely not being induced with a balloon catheter. Now, every single birth is so different. Every experience is so different, obviously. And there may be some woman watching this going oh, I had a balloon catheter, it wasn't that big of a deal. I absolutely detested that experience with my first daughter. I had no idea how uncomfortable that was going to be. And so I was just shocked instantly. And then I felt like it kind of put me into a place of permanent fear for the rest of my labor. And it made my first labor just really, really awful. And so I said, I am not starting labor that way if I'm being induced again. I refuse it. We will do literally any other method. And for all of the appointments I had with my OB, he was on board. He said, that's fine. We can do another method. And that was that. So when I was told to come in at 5 p.m. to start my induction, I didn't even think, wait, this doesn't make sense. Why is he starting my induction at night? I'm laboring at a smaller hospital that doesn't have OR staff overnight. So if something were to happen, this just doesn't add up. I didn't even have that thought because I knew we had conversations about how I was not being induced that way. Because if you are induced that way, you can go home. So typically they'll put it in the evening, you go home, hopefully you dilate enough that the balloon falls out, you come back in, and then you start the next steps in the morning. So I get to the hospital at 5 p.m. and the nurses that let me in go, let's just go chat in triage, because they all know I'm not doing this balloon. I go in there and she says, he wants to put in a balloon catheter. I instantly go, absolutely not. No. We've had this conversation. I was instantly livid because I was in such a good headspace. I had, gotten in the zone. I was like, let's do this. I'm going to meet my baby. And then felt like I hadn't been heard for the 7 months I had been seeing this doctor. And then I was fearful that, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do this balloon and instantly not have the labor that I wanted. So the nurse goes, I know, just relax. I'll call him up here. You can chat with him and we can figure out what we're gonna do. So he comes up. He's barely got 3 steps in the door. And I go, Doc, what the heck, dude? I said I wasn't doing this balloon. And he looks at me and he goes, oh, okay, what did I say when you told me that? And I said, you said it was fine. So anyway, it ended up being this long discussion. We discussed all other types of methods and came to the conclusion that we were all fine to not do the balloon and start with something called Cytotec. Cytotec is either a pill you can take or kind of like almost like a sticker they can put on your cervix to start dilating. I'm sent home to come back in the morning because they're not going to start that at night in case, you know, something goes wrong. My husband and I try to go out for dinner one last time. I'm in a booth crying. My poor husband looks like he's just, you know, said something horrible to me because the waitress is standing there and he's like silent, not knowing what to say, and I'm crying. So going out to eat immediately after was probably not the move. Do you want to join us? Do you want to join us? So we go home and we go to bed. And in the morning we go back in and I'm already feeling a little defeated because I felt like I was in such a good headspace and it was just hard to get back there. I felt like you didn't hear me what I wanted, so are you gonna not hear me with other things that I want for this birth? Something I felt the Lord say very strongly over this pregnancy and, you know, this little guy's life was the word sunshine. And I just pictured sunshine. I just see him as being such a light. And so when we got to the hospital, the sun came up and it was a super, super sunny day. And I just really felt this piece of like, okay, like relax, this can still be the experience you're hoping for and, you know, everything's gonna be okay. I take my first dose of the Cytotec or misoprostol at around 6 a.m. And then I just kind of bounced on the ball, I moved around, and my biggest tip for literally anyone that is going to experience labor, whether you have a faith background or not, is to either use my playlist. If you want the link to my playlist, I will give it to you, or to make your own playlist and just put in some noise canceling headphones and literally get in the freaking zone. I told my husband, when we get to this hospital, I'm putting my earbuds in and you might not hear from me until this baby is out. Because I swear to you, the best thing you can do to prep for your labor is not research, is not packing the perfect bag. It is working on your mental headspace. Keeping fear and anxiety as low as you can, staying calm and relaxed, I truly believe is what made the difference between my first labor and this one. That's what I did. I was just listening to my music. I was really in a different realm. It was very supernatural, honestly. And so the first dose did soften things up. I think I dilated to around a 2 or a 3. And then my OB came and checked on me and we decided to break my water, which was something I was a bit hesitant on because I kind of wanted an epidural before my water was broken, but that means you have to be dilated enough. And so it's just kind of like a math equation waiting for certain things to line up. So I said, okay, fine, break my water. So we do that, which by the way wasn't painful. If you're concerned about, you know, having your water broken, it like really wasn't painful at all. And I said, let's just wait for the next dose of the Cytotec and, you know, see how I progress. So again, I just kept moving around. My contractions, or it wasn't even really contractions, it was more so like cramping, started to pick up a little bit. Again, the sun was blasting through these massive windows. I'm listening to my music. Like, honestly, I was just having a good time knowing I was about to meet my baby. And that I just didn't have to have a balloon catheter and things were still progressing well. I was honestly very excited about not having to do that. So then around 9, I think, was when I had the next dose of the Cytotec, which I think was kind of like the perfect amount of induction, really just put me into pretty rhythmic and strong contractions. So I breathed through and moved through those contractions for a couple of hours. And then I got to a point where I thought, you know, these are pretty strong. I can breathe through them and kind of talk through them. But I've thought, you know, what's the point? if I know I'm fine to get an epidural at some point, might as well just get it now. So I was really okay. And I really wanted them to check me because I was just curious of how dilated I was. But I did test positive for group B strep on my swab. So they didn't want to do too many checks to prevent, introducing any bacteria where it doesn't need to go. I said, what the heck? Call for the epidural. There's really no point in, being in a 7 out of 10 pain when I'm just waiting for 10. And also my biggest tip is to call for or ask for your epidural like 30 minutes to an hour before you think you're really going to be desperate for it, because you're going to ask for it and it's going to take them a minute to get there. So that was kind of my plan too, was if this gets a lot worse, I'm really going to be wishing I had asked before. Anesthesiologist comes in and I am still having pretty predictable rhythmic contractions, probably every 2 minutes or so. And I said to him, I said, please don't give me one of those shitty epidurals, pardon my language, that only works on one side. I knew this doctor, and so we were just kind of joking, and he said, all right, I'll do my best. And the epidural was actually something one of the things I was most worried about, because I didn't have a great experience with my first. My first epidural, he had to stab me like 3-4 times, redo it twice. It actually was quite painful, which I know a lot of women say like, oh, it was no big deal. I really didn't enjoy it the first time. But this time, again, I just was in such a good headspace. I just focused on breathing and got breaks in between contractions. So the epidural went in. It wasn't, that big of a deal. But the initial tingling that you get from an epidural, I did only feel on my right side. And I told him that, and he did some adjustments and then, said, okay, that should be good, and left. Something else I really hoped for with this labor was to not have to use Pitocin. I found Pitocin really gave me these intense, long contractions that just kind of never gave me a break. I know it's very, very common to require it at some point in your delivery. So I wasn't, super optimistic that I wouldn't need it at all, but I did say if we can hold off on it, that would be great. So I was really excited at this point because I had my epidural, I was contracting rhythmically, and I had no Pitocin. So I was like, great, I think we're gonna, go without it. So my epidural's in, I lay back down, and I am still contracting pretty strongly. Like I can feel them. I was still calling them painful, which with my first, they were just gone. And so I was like, what's happening? Why can I still feel this? I'm feeling a lot of pressure. I can also feel everything on my left side. So I was getting a bit nervous about that. So they rolled me onto my left to allow, the medication to hopefully drain to that side as well. But probably within 15 minutes, I said to my husband, please go ask the nurse for Gravol. I think I'm gonna puke. And I was also having to really breathe and work through these contractions. And so the nurse that he asked in the hallway could hear me, and she goes, I don't know. I think I'm gonna check her. So mind you, I've just gotten this epidural, maybe 20 minutes prior. She comes in and she checks me and she goes, yeah, you're a 9. So I don't know. I either got my epidural at like a 7 or an 8, maybe even like right at the cusp of a 9. And I think that's why I could still feel a lot, and also like part of the reason why I only worked on one side. So she goes, I'm gonna call the doctor and you're probably gonna have this baby real soon. She calls my OB and he comes up within, less than 20 minutes. And he checks me, and I'm now at a 10, and it is time to push. At this point, I was losing grip on staying calm and peaceful because I could still feel so much. And I was like, shoot, I wanted an epidural. I didn't want to feel much, and now I feel like I'm gonna feel everything. So we did a couple practice pushes, and like I said, could feel, I could literally have hopped down the hall on my left leg, like everything. My right, you could have chopped it off. Wouldn't have felt a thing. So I did a couple of pushes and I was in, you know, a bit of pain and a lot of pressure, but the nurses told me his head is literally right there. So that actually was really helpful because I was like, okay, you know, this isn't overly comfortable, but I'm not gonna have to do this for hours and hours if he's right there. But I was pretty scared of when he would, like, crowning and, you know, ring of fire, because I was like, yeah, I'm feeling way more than I wanted to. But I was shocked to find that it wasn't that bad. So I started pushing at 10 to 3 and he was out at 3:09. And so really not much pushing, and, you know, crowning, the ring of fire, all of that really wasn't that bad. So the epidural definitely took off some of the pain, but it was way better than I was expecting. Like, I was, you know, talking in between pushes. I, you know, could stay calm because it was like, okay, this isn't that bad. We can do this. At 3:09, he comes out and they put him on my chest. We did not know. We waited to find out if we were going to have a boy or a girl, but I felt so strongly that he was going to be a boy that when they took him out and they said, it's a boy, my first thing that I said was, oh my gosh, I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I would have been shocked if they said it was a girl. And so they put him on my chest, and this labor and that experience was so different from my first. I had disassociated when they put my daughter on my chest so much because I had just spent so many hours in fear, full of anxiety. I had been laboring for like 2 days, like almost 3 days. And I just was like so checked out mentally that when they put her on my chest, like, I have pictures, like, you can tell, like, I am just not there. And so I was really sad for that experience because, you know, women always talked about how amazing it was, like, and it's like a feeling unlike any other. And I remember thinking with my first, like, yeah, that was more trauma than anything. But this time it was so, so different. And it truly was that just like, wow, this is incredible kind of feeling. And he also got to stay on my chest for quite a while with my daughter. They had to take her over to the heater and, you know, suction some mucus and stuff like that. But he cried right away. And so that helped a lot. So my husband was crying next to me, and I just was like, I could not believe that we had a girl and a boy. Like, I just couldn't believe it. And my husband is a barber, and so he's like tearing up, and one of the first things I said, I was like, oh, you can give him fades. And my husband was like, yeah, I know. So it was a really, really incredible experience, and something that I just love talking about because, like I said at the start, I feel like some people have this big, like, hesitancy or fear of hospitals because of, you know, how the last 6 years have been with the, like, medical world. But please take it from me, you can have a beautiful, beautiful experience. I told my nurses everything that I wanted and what I didn't want, and they were so open and respectful and mindful. There were some things they even, you know, not gave me pushback on, but gave me their opinion on, and I was so grateful for that. So if I could encourage you of anything with birth, is to make your request known. Don't be afraid of that. Be open to what, you know, professionals recommend or have to say. But at the end of the day, if you don't want a balloon catheter, everything can work out beautifully. And then, like I said, focus so much time and energy into your headspace and get that playlist going, put in your earbuds and just disconnect and focus on the fact that you're about to meet your baby and that, you know, everything's gonna be okay. I think I'm probably missing a ton of details, but that's kind of what still stands out to me after, you know, 6 weeks. Postpartum for me has been extremely difficult. One of the most difficult things I've ever gone through, way worse than my first, which I'll probably make a separate video on and just kind of discuss things that happened, what I've learned, and all that kind of stuff. But I am so, so grateful to have had a beautiful, beautiful birth the second time around.